That's my friend, Marley. You caught us. Little insurance always comes in handy. Clearly, you're a man who understands that.
We are talking The Survivalist. This one is directed by John Keyes and stars Jonathan Rhys-Meyers, John Malkovich and Julian Sands. Now this is a kind of post-apocalyptic science fiction action movie which actually takes cues from current events. So we have a world which has been ravaged by a coronavirus variant and essentially has caused the kind of the end of the world, and this particular variant has killed off kind of many kind of the inhabitants, but also reduced the workforce. Therefore things like nuclear plants haven't been well manned, and ultimately that added to the problem with kind of the melting down and stuff. So we have essentially a kind of post-apocalyptic environment. And the focus of this story has John Malkovich as a kind of a leader of his land pirates who are chasing down this girl who they believe is immune to the virus, and she kind of holds up with this character played by Jonathan Rhys-Meyers, who has maybe a connection to someone she used to kind of know. And what will happen? Well, you're just going to have to watch the movie to find out. So it's kind of fairly standard in regards to its kind of setup for a typical kind of post-apocalyptic movie. We've seen variations of this kind of movie, you know, looking for the kind of person who's immune or fertile or something like that, in a variety of kind of different kind of post-apocalyptic scenarios. What can I say that works in this movie? For one thing, I would say the cast is pretty good here, with three kind of recognisable and established actors here, and all of whom have got their kind of fan base. And I have to say, if you're a fan of Con Air, then John Malkovich is kind of channeling Cyrus the Virus. I was kind of feeling this. A lot of his kind of dialogue feels like it could have come straight out of Con Air. The movie is relatively well shot, I have to say. On a technical level, I think it's a proficient kind of filmmaking, certainly with the kind of the director of photography, cinematography, and kind of those kind of things. The movie feels like it, you know, is quite well shot and proficiently made. And there are a couple of reasonable kind of fight scenes, and especially made tense when we learn that things like ammo, for example, is extremely scarce now. So, you know, bullets and stuff can't be kind of wasted, which makes the, you know, obviously when we do have kind of gunfights, every kind of bullet really is kind of counting there. And the movie is relatively kind of action-packed. Essentially, the movie is almost entirely a siege film, which we're going to come on to in just a second. So there is a reasonable amount of kind of action here. Okay, what does not work with this movie? I'm just going to continue what I've just been talking about. So this movie is more or less just a siege movie, and that's pretty much it. Narratively, this has got to be one of the weakest stories I've seen for this kind of, like, you know, post-apocalyptic kind of world. It's so slim. There's nothing really here narratively. It's just a kind of bunch of pirates turn up and after a go, and then it's a siege. That's it. That's your movie. There's really not any kind of real kind of narrative other than that. I was so surprised. The whole movie feels like it should be the third act of a different movie. You know, an expanded kind of third act of you know, another film where we have, you know, we've introduced characters and stuff like this. So story-wise, it's pretty bland, I have to say, and feels kind of stretched out. Yes, there are kind of action sequences which I do think are well handled, but the story is so slight you can't help but feel it's kind of dull. The movie also tries to expand upon the narrative by having flashbacks, particularly with Julian Sands' character, who is the father of Jonathan Rhys-Meyers. But to be honest with you, they don't really have any impact on the story. In actual fact, you could completely remove those scenes and it have no real impact on the actual kind of current events, so to speak. So they seemed very kind of pointless, and they're meant to kind of, I guess, flesh out Jonathan Rhys-Meyers' character, but it's, to me, that the whole kind of relationship between him and his father has no real bearing on the actual plot itself. So it seemed completely unnecessary to have all these kind of flashbacks and show his kind of relationship with his father, when it has no actual kind of story impact on the kind of the main plot here. It kind of feels like padding. Let's talk about the script. Now, this script, and it has a lot of exposition in it, from kind of characters kind of having exposition dumps and kind of telling you things in kind of quite unrealistic ways. That's just to kind of drop knowledge bombs on you so you can kind of understand the plot and where people are coming from, to kind of like people on the radio kind of giving you, again, massive kind of exposition dumps. The dialogue here is a little bit rough at times. Now, I've mentioned John Malkovich kind of almost kind of playing the same role as he did in Con Air as Cyrus the Virus. And his lines, some of his lines are quite fun, but it almost feels just like rehashing the same type of character. Oh, he's got these kind of smart one-liners and kind of like he says these like amusing kind of insults and stuff like that. It doesn't feel anything really fresh. I have to say that the fact that this is kind of meant to be a COVID movie, I don't know if this was ever really initially intended to be that, because any kind of mentions of the coronavirus are really only done in the kind of like the radio station, which kind of gives this kind of these exposition dumps. The actual characters themselves will refer to it as a virus and how people are, maybe infected or they're not infected and things like this, but they never actually say COVID themselves. And I'm wondering if this was just made as a kind of an outbreak movie without necessarily linking it directly to the kind of the coronavirus, but in the kind of the actual story with these kind of these radio broadcasts, which again, they're nothing to do with the actual plot. It's just kind of like an overlay. Obviously, do link it to current events, and I have a little bit of a mixed feeling about that, to be honest. Because for a start, it says this is kind of 500 days after the kind of like the outbreak, which is a year and a half, which, to be honest with you, seems a little short for this kind of this type of level of a kind of apocalypse there and stuff like that. So to me, it kind of has some problems, and there's also, linking it to a kind of a real life event may be a little bit problematic for some people. Maybe it would have been better just to say the virus and stuff like that, and kind of leave it at that. I have to also say the acting here is fairly poor, and not just from the kind of the non-named actors. Even the kind of the named actors here, even the kind of the people that you recognise, I do not think did a particularly good job. I don't know if the shooting schedule was very quick. It's obviously somewhat of a low budget film, so I suspect it might be the case. So they've had, actors like John Malkovich probably not on set all that much, and therefore, had just a couple of takes per kind of scene and stuff like that. And as such, I think maybe the some of the acting doesn't come across as particularly good, especially I would say from Julian Sands' character, but also some of the kind of the non kind of famous actors, if you like. Quite poor acting linked in with some pretty poor dialogue. It does not make for a particularly interesting film. And I think, and just to kind of follow that back round, as I say, the plot here is so slight, and we don't really know anything about this woman who Jonathan Rhys-Meyers' character is kind of protecting and stuff like that. It's kind of no characterization there whatsoever. And to be honest with you, you put yourself in the character of Jonathan Rhys-Meyers' character, and you think, Jesus, just kick her out on the curb. Why protect her? Because we don't know anything about her. We haven't kind of been connected to her. So to me, this was quite a poor movie. It's obviously kind of low budget. We don't really see much kind of world building. All we get is the kind of the radio broadcasts that tell us these things, but we don't ever really kind of see it outside of just a tad of bit of stock footage here. So it feels just kind of like this was a really quick movie to kind of put together. Technically, on some technical aspects, I think this movie is proficient. But for a kind of an entertainment piece, for a kind of a movie to get your teeth into, outside of seeing a couple of actors in a B movie, it's somewhat forgettable and a little even less than lackluster. I'm going to give this one a 3 out of 10. It was pretty unremarkable, let's just say that. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? It's a 3 out of 10 for me. Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.